This video will focus on one area of developing content when writing at work: informative prose. I'll explain 3 techniques for developing informative content. You may have heard of the techniques I'm going to explain before, but in this case I'm going to help you understand how important they are for experts who write by discussing workplace examples. We'll be considering the content of a business plan written by the founder of a company called Fabrica. Writers can't succeed in developing the right content for their messages without a clear understanding of the context. That means we need to consider the principles you've learned about purpose and audience analysis. Let's start with the side of the rhetorical triangle connecting the writer to the message. That means considering the principles for identifying the purpose. There's no question that a business plan's message is dynamic, prompting the audience to respond by at least talking to whoever wrote the plan, in this case Fabrica. So the purpose of a business plan is primarily directive. Remember that selecting one primary quadrant of the competing values model as the primary purpose does not mean other purposes can or should not also be included. It just means we know that a successful business plan causes action. Let's continue thinking through the context of the Fabrica business plan by considering the side of the rhetorical triangle connecting the audience to the message. That means considering the principles for analyzing the audience, in particular, their readiness. The audience of potential investors or venture capitalists the writer wants to reach is made up of non-experts. Now, you may think of such an audience as experts. However, while they may be experts on the financial content within the proposal, they're not likely to be experts about this specific company or even textile engineering. That means the writer has to overcome their inability to accept the document's message by providing informative prose, perhaps graphics, when they're useful for building up the necessary knowledge to understand the proposal. The audience is also going to be skeptical or somewhat sensitive to the message, but I'll discuss that in the video on developing persuasive prose. Finally, to complete our audience analysis, we'll consider the last side of the rhetorical triangle, connecting the audience to the writer. Without more information about who Fabrica is sending the business plan to, we can't even begin to identify value differences. And we also can't guess about the existing relationships between the founder and potential investors. The writer should certainly do this. In terms of power differences, there's not much likely. On the one hand, the writer wants the audience to invest in the business. On the other hand, investors are looking for businesses to invest in. As I've said before, the more differences and distance between the writer and the audience, the more important input from representative audience members becomes. What the writer knows at this point is that the audience has low expertise, and informative prose is going to be the key to increasing their readiness to comply with the writer's directive to invest, if not money, at least time, in the business venture. Now we can move forward with developing that information. The first technique for developing informative content is defining or describing. Can you identify terms that might be unfamiliar to the audience of investors in this passage from Fabrica's business plan? Well, Dobby loom is an obvious candidate. This is a technical term the audience is likely not to understand without a definition. There are different types of definitions: formal, extended, operational. A formal definition like the one shown is not likely to meet the needs of the non-expert investors in this case. It uses more technical terminology. It'd be helpful to engineering novices who are learning about the mechanisms. The operational definition I'm showing is much more useful with the business plan's audience because it's less technical, instead focusing on the function of this type of loom. Sometimes it's helpful for writers to provide different types of definitions in different locations within a longer message. For instance, the writer of the business plan could increase the readiness of the audience by providing an operational definition in the executive summary portion of the document and an extended definition in another portion of the document describing in greater detail the value proposition in their manufacturing process. What might be better understood with added description in this passage? What about describing the inventor and the R&D director to increase the audience's expertise on Fabrica? The potential investors are likely not experts on this individual, but he's critical to Fabrica's business success. Typical business plans include a description of the major personnel involved in the business for that very reason. Can you identify anything else that might be better understood with a description? How well do you think the audience understands unique constellation of features? To increase their expertise, the revised version here has a list of 4 specific features that make Fabrica's loom unique. Description leads to precision. The writer of this business plan could be more precise and increase the readiness of the audience by describing relevant details about the loom's features. Let's consider a new passage. What might be better understood by the business plan's audience with an example? How well do you think the audience understands market? In the addition here, there are now examples of 4 market types: weaving mills, fabric traders, designers, and garment manufacturers. A group of potential investors is now more likely to have the knowledge they need to overcome their lack of expertise about the market for Fabrica's product. Sharing outside sources of information with the audience is the last technique I'll discuss for developing informative prose. The passage we considered on the previous slide would benefit from identifying a source for the information. This type of detail is most relevant for overcoming audience willingness to accept a message rather than their ability. Thus, I'll discuss it more thoroughly when we tackle the development of persuasive content. To get their readers ready to accept their message, especially non-expert readers, writers must develop informative prose to build up audience knowledge, the knowledge that's needed to understand their message. The techniques I've covered in this video will help you only if you know what your audience needs. For instance, giving an example that's not familiar to readers is not likely to help you build up their expertise. Sometimes you may need to find out more about your audience before you can develop the right information for them.